We never forgot you, Mama Celeste. We never stopped believing in you. And we never stopped fighting to bring you home. But how did three successful adults end up saying these words to a woman walking out of prison after 25 years? Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're ready for a story that'll show you the true power of love, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments who saved you in ways they never knew. Tomorrow brings another incredible journey. Now let's discover how one woman's compassion created ripples that changed everything. Let us begin. Judge Patricia Lawson had seen enough parole hearings to recognize hope in a defendant's eyes, and she saw none in Celeste Washington's. The 58-year-old woman sat perfectly still at the defendant's table, her graying hair pulled back in a neat bun, hands folded with the practiced patience of someone who had learned not to expect miracles. "Mrs. Washington," Judge Lawson began, glancing at the thick file before her. "This is your third parole hearing in 25 years. You were convicted of armed robbery and assault with intent to kill. The victim, store owner Jin Liu, was left in a coma for 6 months." Celeste's voice was steady, worn smooth by decades of telling the same truth to deaf ears. "Your Honor, I was not in that store on March 15, 1999. I was 3 blocks away, helping 3 children I'd found living in an abandoned building." The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed man named Derek Mills, shifted impatiently. He'd inherited this case from his predecessor and had no patience for what he considered elaborate fiction. "Your Honor, Mrs. Washington has maintained this same story for 25 years, despite overwhelming evidence that was circumstantial," Celeste interrupted quietly. "A witness who later admitted he wasn't wearing his glasses, security footage so grainy you couldn't make out faces, and a public defender who met with me exactly twice." Judge Lawson had read every word of the case file. The evidence had been thin, but the jury had convicted anyway. Sometimes the system failed. Sometimes innocent people slipped through the cracks. She was about to deny parole again when her clerk leaned over and whispered something that made her pause. "Your Honor," the clerk said, "there are 3 people outside who claim to be character witnesses for Mrs. Washington. They don't have appointments, but they say they've driven from 3 different states and won't leave until they're heard." Meanwhile, 3 floors below in the courthouse lobby, Dr. Anthony Rivers paced near the security checkpoint, checking his phone for the 10th time in 5 minutes. At 32, he carried himself with the confident posture of someone who'd fought hard for everything he'd achieved, but today his usual composure was cracking. "They have to let us in," he muttered to his companions. "She's been in there 25 years for something she didn't do." Attorney Jessica Chen, elegant in her perfectly tailored suit, placed a calming hand on his shoulder. She'd flown in from Seattle that morning, canceling 3 important client meetings. "We'll get our chance, Tony. We have rights as character witnesses." The third member of their unlikely trio sat quietly on a bench, his hands clasped tightly together. Michael Torres, now a successful teacher and coach, looked up at his childhood companions with the same fierce loyalty that had bonded them decades ago. "She saved us," he said simply. "Now we save her." What would you do if you discovered someone who changed your life was suffering injustice? Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had someone who saved you in ways they never even knew? 25 years earlier, these 3 had been nameless street kids surviving in the shadows of Detroit's East Side. Tony, barely 7, had been living off scraps from dumpsters after his drug-addicted mother disappeared. Jessica, 9, had run away from her 5th foster home, where her foster father's hands wandered. Michael, 8, had been sleeping in doorways since aging out of an overcrowded group home. They might have died there in that maze of abandoned buildings if Celeste Washington hadn't found them. She'd been walking home from her job at the community center that cold February night when she heard crying coming from the ruins of what used to be Murphy's Grocery. Against every instinct of urban survival, she'd investigated. "Hey there," she'd called softly into the darkness. "I'm not going to hurt you." 3 pairs of eyes had stared back at her from the shadows, hollow, feral, afraid. But something in her voice, some quality of genuine care, had made them hesitate instead of run. "My name is Celeste," she'd said, crouching down to their level, "and I think you all look hungry." That was the beginning of everything. For 6 weeks, Celeste had visited them daily, bringing food, blankets, medicine when Tony developed a fever that nearly killed him. She'd been working with social services to find them proper homes, fighting through red tape and bureaucracy with the tenacity of someone who understood that children's lives hung in the balance. She'd been making progress too. There was a family willing to take Michael, a special program that might help Jessica heal from her trauma. Tony was the hardest case. His behavioral issues and health problems made him difficult to place, but Celeste had found a couple who specialized in children with special needs. Then, on March 15, 1999, everything had shattered. Celeste had been bringing them dinner when she'd heard the sirens. Police cars had surrounded the building where the children hid, but they weren't there for the kids, they were there for her. "Celeste Washington, you're under arrest for the armed robbery of Lou's Corner Market and the assault of Jin Lou." The children had watched in terror as the woman who'd become their lifeline was dragged away in handcuffs. In the chaos that followed, they were swept into the system, separated, scattered, forgotten by everyone except each other and the woman who'd loved them first. Now, 25 years later, they were successful adults with resources, connections, and most importantly, the unshakable conviction that the woman who'd saved them was innocent. Judge Lawson looked down at the 3 people who'd just been escorted into her courtroom. She'd seen many character witnesses over the years, but something about this trio commanded attention. They stood with the easy confidence of people accustomed to being heard, yet there was something deeper in their eyes, a fierce, protective love that reminded her of family defending family. "Your Honor," Dr. Rivers stepped forward, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd testified before medical boards and hospital committees. "My name is Dr. Anthony Rivers. I'm the head of pediatric surgery at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. 25 years ago, Celeste Washington saved my life." Attorney Chen stepped forward next. "Jessica Chen, partner at Morrison, Chen & Associates in Seattle. Mrs. Washington saved mine as well." Michael Torres, III, said quietly, "I teach 4th grade in Denver, and I coach Little League. She saved me too." Celeste's carefully maintained composure finally cracked. Tears streamed down her face as she stared at the 3 adults who'd once been broken children in an abandoned building. They were alive, they were successful, they were here, and they were fighting for her. Judge Lawson had presided over thousands of hearings, but the electricity in her courtroom was unlike anything she'd experienced. The 3 witnesses stood like guardians, their presence transforming the sterile legal proceeding into something far more profound. "Dr. Rivers," she said carefully, "you may proceed with your testimony." Anthony stepped forward, his hand steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. "Your Honor, on March 15, 1999, I was dying. I was 7 years old, living in the ruins of Murphy's Grocery with a fever of 104 degrees. Celeste Washington had been caring for me, my sister Jessica, and my brother Michael. We're not related by blood," Jessica interjected softly, "but we became family in that place. She'd been bringing me medicine," Anthony continued, "checking on me every few hours. That night, the night she was supposedly robbing Jin Lou's store, she was spooning broth into my mouth and putting cold compresses on my forehead. I was delirious, but I remember her voice. She was singing to me." Celeste's breath caught. She remembered that song, an old spiritual her grandmother had sung to her when she was sick. "Wade in the water." What time was this? Judge Lawson asked. The robbery happened at 8:47 p.m. according to police reports, Jessica said, consulting a folder thick with documents. At 8:47 p.m., Celeste Washington was 3 blocks away, saving Anthony's life. I know because I was keeping time, watching the clock on the old church tower through the broken window. She'd taught us to tell time that way. Michael stepped forward, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who'd spent years working with children. Your Honor, I need to tell you about the woman we knew. Celeste didn't just feed us or give us shelter, she saw us when the world had made us invisible. He turned to face Celeste directly, and when he spoke, his words carried 25 years of gratitude and grief. Do you remember what you told me the first night we met? When I said I was worthless, that nobody cared if I lived or died? Celeste's voice was barely a whisper. I told you that wasn't true. I told you that you mattered. You said, Michael, baby, you are a miracle walking around in tennis shoes with holes in them. Don't you let this world convince you otherwise? His voice broke slightly. A woman who sees miracles in throwaway children doesn't rob convenience stores, Your Honor. She saves lives. The prosecutor, Mills, shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't going according to the script he'd prepared. Your Honor, while this testimony is touching, it doesn't change the facts of the case. Mrs. Washington was identified by an eyewitness, a witness who later recanted. Jessica interrupted, her attorney instincts taking over. Harold Brennan admitted 3 years after the trial that he hadn't been wearing his prescription glasses that night. His identification was worthless. The security footage, Mills began, was so degraded you couldn't make out facial features, only general height and build, Jessica continued. My team had it analyzed by forensic video experts. The image quality wouldn't meet today's standards for evidence. Judge Lawson held up her hand for silence. Something about this case had always bothered her, even before these witnesses had arrived. She'd read the transcripts, studied the evidence files. The conviction had felt thin, rushed, built on circumstantial evidence and a public defender who'd seemed more interested in plea bargains than investigation. Dr. Rivers, she said, you mentioned that Mrs. Washington had been working with social services to place you children in homes. Can you elaborate on that? Anthony nodded. She'd been fighting for weeks to get us into the system properly, not just dumped in group homes, but actually placed with families who could help us heal. She had meetings scheduled with social workers, potential foster families. She was documenting our health issues, our educational needs. His voice grew stronger. Your Honor, Celeste Washington was in the process of changing our lives legally and permanently. Why would she risk that by robbing a store for a few $100s? The question hung in the air like a challenge to everything the justice system had decided 25 years ago. Celeste watched her children, her babies who had grown into these remarkable adults, and felt something she hadn't experienced in decades. Hope, but it was a dangerous emotion in a place like this. Hope had been beaten out of her by years of appeals denied, parole hearings failed, lawyers who stopped returning calls. There's something else, Michael said quietly. Something we need to tell you about that night. He looked at his companions, and some silent communication passed between them. Jessica nodded encouragingly. We saw what happened, Michael continued. We saw the real robber. The courtroom fell completely silent. Even Mills stopped shuffling his papers. We were children, Anthony said, picking up the thread. Traumatized, scared, living on the streets. When Celeste was arrested, we tried to tell the police what we'd seen, but nobody listened to 3 dirty kids with no last names and no addresses. What did you see? Judge Lawson asked, leaning forward. Jessica opened her folder and pulled out a photograph, old, slightly blurred, but clear enough. This is Damon Wright. He was a regular in our neighborhood, a junkie who targeted small businesses. We knew him by sight because Celeste had warned us to stay away from him. Where did you get this photograph? Mills demanded. From the Detroit PD's own files, Jessica replied calmly. Wright was arrested 6 months after Celeste's conviction for a series of armed robberies with an identical pattern. Same MO, same weapon type, same target, small family-owned stores. He died in prison in 2003, but not before confessing to 17 robberies, including several that had been attributed to other suspects. She pulled out another document. This is his confession transcript. On page 47, he mentions Larue's Corner Market specifically. Quote, "That Chinese place on Gratiot, yeah, I hit that one too. Felt bad about it 'cause the old man fought back and I had to clock him good. Heard some lady got blamed for it, but that wasn't right. I was high as a kite that night, running wild." The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Sometimes the truth takes decades to surface. Have you ever witnessed an injustice that took years to be recognized? Tell us in the comments about a time when someone's innocence was finally proven. Mills was frantically flipping through his files. Why wasn't this confession examined at the time? Why wasn't it connected to Mrs. Washington's case? Because, Anthony said, his surgeon's precision cutting through the legal confusion, nobody was looking for connections to a case they considered closed. A poor black woman had been convicted, and that was enough. The system moved on. Judge Lawson stared at the documents Jessica had presented, her mind racing through the implications. Mrs. Chen, as an officer of the court, are you prepared to swear that this evidence is authentic? I am, Your Honor. Moreover, I've filed a formal motion for post-conviction relief based on newly discovered evidence. These documents have been verified by independent sources and are ready for full judicial review. Celeste sat in stunned silence, watching 25 years of injustice potentially unravel in a single afternoon. The children she'd loved, the babies she'd sung to sleep and fed with her own hands, had not only survived, they'd become her salvation. Your Honor, Michael said, his teacher's voice clear and strong, Celeste Washington taught us that family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when everything falls apart. She showed up for us when we were nothing and nobody. Now we're showing up for her. He turned to face Celeste directly, and when he spoke, his words carried the weight of 25 years of love, loss, and determination. We never forgot you, Mama Celeste. We never stopped believing in you. And we never stopped fighting to bring you home. The word Mum broke something inside Celeste that had been carefully constructed over 2.5 decades of imprisonment. She sobbed openly, reaching toward them with hands that had been clenched in prayer for so many years they'd forgotten how to reach for joy. Judge Lawson looked from the evidence to the woman who'd been failed by every level of the justice system. The path forward was clear, but the magnitude of the failure, 25 years of an innocent woman's life stolen, was staggering. Mr. Mills, she said quietly, I'm ordering an immediate stay of Mrs. Washington's sentence pending a full review of this new evidence. Furthermore, I'm recommending that the district attorney's office launch a comprehensive investigation into how this miscarriage of justice occurred. She looked directly at Celeste. Mrs. Washington, while I cannot give you back the years that were taken from you, I can ensure that you walk out of here today as a free woman. The gavel came down like thunder, and with it, the walls that had held Celeste Washington for 25 years finally crumbled. The courthouse steps were chaos. News vans materialized as if summoned by the scent of injustice finally exposed, their reporters shoving microphones toward anyone connected to the case. Celeste stood frozen in the afternoon sunlight, her legs unsteady after 25 years of fluorescent prison lighting. Mrs. Washington, how does it feel to be free? A reporter thrust a camera in her face. Anthony stepped between them like a shield. No questions. Give her space. But Celeste couldn't process the word free. Freedom was a concept she'd buried so deep that its sudden resurrection felt more like violation than victory. Her hands shook as Jessica gently guided her toward a waiting car, away from the cameras and chaos. Celeste's voice cracked. I need to go back. The three adults exchanged worried glances. Michael crouched beside her on the courthouse steps, his voice gentle but firm. Mama Celeste, you're never going back to that place. Never. You don't understand. Her eyes darted frantically between their faces, faces that had haunted her dreams for decades, but now seemed impossibly real. I don't know how to. I don't have anywhere. She pressed her palms against her temples. This is too fast. Everything is too fast. Inside the courthouse, Prosecutor Mills was having his own crisis. He'd built a career on convictions, on being the voice of justice, and now he was staring at evidence that suggested he'd spent the morning arguing to keep an innocent woman imprisoned. His hands trembled as he dialed his supervisor. Sir, we have a problem with the Washington case. A big problem. District Attorney Rebecca Stone's voice was sharp through the phone. What kind of problem, Mills? The kind that ends careers and starts federal investigations. He explained the confession evidence, the timeline discrepancies, the witness recantation. With each detail, he could hear his future crumbling. Sir, I think we need to consider a full review of similar cases from that era. Absolutely not. Stone's response was immediate and cold. One case doesn't indicate a pattern. We handle this quietly, professionally, and we move on. But ma'am, if Wright confessed to 17 robberies that were pinned on other people, then that's 17 cases that would cost the city millions in settlements and destroy public confidence in the justice system. Her voice carried the weight of political calculation. Mills, you're going to draft a statement expressing our office's commitment to justice while emphasizing that this was an unfortunate aberration, not a systemic failure. Mills stared at his phone after she hung up. 25 years of an innocent woman's life, and they were calling it an aberration. Meanwhile, at the Marriott downtown, Celeste sat on the edge of the hotel bed, staring at her reflection in the mirror across the room. The woman looking back was a stranger, gray-haired, lined with decades of institutional living, wearing clothes that Jessica had hastily bought from the hotel gift shop. The shower has hot water whenever you want it, Anthony said gently, trying to fill the silence. And room service. You can order anything, anytime. Celeste nodded but didn't move. The luxury felt obscene. For 25 years, she'd lived in an 8x10 cell with a metal toilet and a thin mattress. This hotel room was bigger than any space she'd inhabited since 1999. I keep waiting for someone to tell me it's time to go back, she whispered. Jessica sat beside her, careful not to touch without permission. Celeste, you're free, legally completely free. There's no going back. But I don't know how to be free. The words came out broken, desperate. I don't know how to order food, or use a cell phone, or... She gestured helplessly at the window overlooking the city. I don't know this world anymore. Michael pulled a chair closer, his teacher instincts recognizing the signs of overwhelming anxiety. Do you remember what you used to tell us when we were scared? When everything felt too big and too much? Celeste's breathing was shallow, rapid. I don't remember being that person. You told us to take it one breath at a time, he continued softly. One moment, one choice, one step. You said we didn't have to fix everything at once. That was different. Her voice was sharp with something that might have been anger. You were children. I was trying to save you. But I couldn't even save myself, could I? I failed at the one thing that mattered most. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Anthony leaned forward, his surgeon's hands steady as he spoke. Celeste, you didn't fail. The system failed. The lawyers failed. The police failed. You did everything right. If I did everything right, why did I spend 25 years in prison while you grew up without me? The dam of controlled emotion finally burst. You needed me, and I wasn't there. I wasn't there for first days of school or birthdays or when you were scared or sick or— But we carried you with us, Jessica interrupted, her attorney composure cracking. Every day, Celeste. Every single day. She pulled out her phone, scrolling to a photo. This is my daughter Nina. She's 8. Do you know what I tell her when she's afraid? Celeste shook her head. I tell her she's a miracle walking around in tennis shoes. I tell her exactly what you told Michael that first night. Jessica's voice broke. You were there, Celeste. In every choice we made, every person we helped, every time we refused to give up, you were there. But Celeste was retreating into herself, the way prisoners learn to do when reality becomes too overwhelming. I need to be alone. Please. I need to be alone. The three exchanged worried glances, but they respected her request. As they prepared to leave, Anthony paused at the door. We're not going anywhere, okay? We're staying in Detroit until you're ready, however long that takes. After they left, Celeste lay on the hotel bed fully clothed, staring at the ceiling. The silence was wrong, too complete, too voluntary. In prison, silence was stolen, precious. Here, it felt like abandonment. She reached for the phone to call the front desk, to ask them to send her children back, but her hand stopped halfway. What if they realized their mistake? What if they understood that the woman they remembered, the woman who'd saved them, was gone, replaced by this broken thing that couldn't even order room service without panic? Outside in the hallway, Anthony paced while Jessica and Michael sat in uncomfortable hotel chairs. She's traumatized, Anthony said, his medical training analyzing what they'd witnessed. 25 years of institutional living doesn't just disappear because a judge bangs a gavel. She's going to need time, therapy, support. She's pushing us away, Michael observed. It's what kids do when they're scared. They test whether you'll stay or leave. Jessica nodded. She doesn't trust this yet. How could she? Every time she's hoped for freedom, it's been taken away. Why should today be different? They didn't have answers, only the fierce loyalty that had brought them here and the unshakable conviction that they wouldn't abandon the woman who'd never abandoned them. Back in the room, Celeste found herself doing something she hadn't done in 25 years. She locked the door from the inside by choice, not because someone else had decided she needed to be contained. It was a small thing, but it was hers. The first step toward believing that freedom might actually be possible. Recovery from trauma takes time, even when justice finally comes. Have you ever experienced a moment when good news felt too overwhelming to believe? Share your thoughts on how we can support people transitioning from dark times to hope. The knock came at 6 a.m., soft but persistent. Celeste had been awake since 3, sitting by the window watching the city wake up, a luxury that still felt foreign after decades of controlled schedules and artificial light. Mama Celeste, Michael's voice carried through the door. We brought breakfast. She hesitated, then opened the door to find all 3 of them in the hallway, looking like they'd slept as poorly as she had. Anthony carried a bag from what smelled like a bakery, Jessica held a thermos of coffee, and Michael had a newspaper tucked under his arm. We thought you might want to see this, he said, unfolding the Detroit Free Press. The headline made her stomach clench. Wrongfully convicted woman freed after 25 years, 3 children she saved prove her innocence. Her photograph, an old booking photo from 1999, stared back at her alongside recent pictures of Anthony in surgical scrubs, Jessica in a courtroom, Michael with his students. The contrast was jarring. Everyone's going to know, she whispered. Know what? Jessica asked gently. That I'm— Celeste struggled with words that had been trained out of her. That I'm an ex-con, that I was in prison, nobody's going to want to hire you, Anthony finished. Rent to you. Be your friend? He set the bakery bag on the small table. Celeste, the entire city is calling you a hero. The mayor wants to give you a key to the city. The governor is talking about criminal justice reform. But Celeste was shaking her head, backing away from the newspaper. They don't understand. I'm not the same person who saved you. That woman is gone. Her phone, a simple cell phone Jessica had bought for her, began ringing. The sound made her jump. She stared at it like it was a snake. Want me to answer it? Michael offered. Celeste nodded gratefully. He listened for a moment, then covered the mouthpiece. It's a reporter from CNN. They want to interview you for a segment on wrongful convictions. No. The word came out sharp, final. No interviews. No cameras. No, I can't. Jessica gently took the phone and politely declined the interview, but it rang again immediately. And again. We need to get out of here, Anthony said, looking out the window at the news vans gathering in the hotel parking lot. Somewhere private, where you can breathe. Where? Celeste's voice was small. I don't have anywhere to go. I don't have a home or a job or— The reality of her situation hit her fully for the first time. I don't have a life to go back to. Michael was already pulling out his phone. My house in Denver. It's quiet. Private. You can stay as long as you need. I can't impose. You're not imposing, he said firmly. You're family. But even as they made plans, Celeste felt the walls closing in. These people, her children, had lives, careers, families of their own. How long before they realized that caring for a traumatized ex-convict wasn't sustainable? How long before obligation turned to resentment? The phone rang again. This time it was someone claiming to be from a victims' rights organization, wanting her to speak at a conference. Then a publisher interested in her story. Then a lawyer discussing potential lawsuits against the city. Make it stop, Celeste whispered, covering her ears. Jessica quickly turned off the phone, but the damage was done. Celeste was hyperventilating, her institutional training warring with newfound freedom in a way that left her paralyzed. Hey, Anthony said, his voice taking on the calm authority he used with frightened children in the hospital. Look at me, Celeste. Just me. She focused on his face, older now, marked by years of training and responsibility, but still carrying traces of the 7-year-old boy she'd held while fever nearly claimed him. Remember what you taught us about breathing? He asked. When I was sick and scared, you made me count breaths with you. She nodded slightly. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, with me now. They breathed together, the woman who'd saved him and the man who was now saving her, connected by rhythms she'd taught him decades ago. We're going to Denver, Jessica said, once Celeste's breathing steadied. All of us. I'm taking a leave of absence. Anthony's adjusting his schedule, and Michael lives there. We're not leaving you to figure this out alone. You can't put your lives on hold for me, Celeste protested. Watch us, Michael said simply. By afternoon, they were on a plane to Denver. Celeste gripped the armrests during takeoff, overwhelmed by the sensation of willing flight after years of dreaming about walls dissolving. The businessman in the seat behind them recognized her from the news and tried to start a conversation about the justice system, but Anthony politely but firmly redirected him. She's had enough interviews for one lifetime, he said. Michael's house was everything Celeste hadn't dared to dream of. A craftsman bungalow with a front porch, a garden, and most importantly, no cameras or reporters in sight. But as they pulled into the driveway, a new anxiety gripped her. This is too much, she said, staring at the neat lawn and flower boxes. This is your home, your space. I don't belong. Stop. Jessica's voice was gentle but firm. "Celeste, when we were kids living in that abandoned building, did you ask if we belonged there before you helped us?" That was different. How? Celeste couldn't answer because there was no difference, not really. She'd seen children who needed help, and she'd helped them. Now they were seeing a woman who needed help, and they were helping her. But accepting help felt infinitely harder than giving it. Inside, Michael's house was warm, lived in, filled with evidence of a life well built. Student artwork covered the refrigerator, books filled every shelf, and photographs showed him coaching little league teams and chaperoning school trips. "You did it," Celeste whispered, touching one of the photographs. "You became everything I hoped you could be." "We all did," Michael said. "But we couldn't have done it without what you gave us first." That evening they sat around his kitchen table, sharing pizza, another freedom Celeste was still adjusting to, the ability to eat what she wanted when she wanted it. The conversation was careful, gentle, focused on present things. Michael's students, Anthony's work at the hospital, Jessica's daughter. But under the surface, 25 years of separation hummed like an electrical current. There were decades of stories to share, grief to process, and a relationship to rebuild between a woman who'd stopped believing in tomorrow and 3 adults who'd carried her memory through every milestone she'd missed. "I need you to understand something," Celeste said suddenly, setting down her pizza slice. "I'm grateful, more grateful than I know how to express, but I'm also terrified." They waited, letting her find her words. "For 25 years I've been angry. At the police who didn't listen, at the lawyers who didn't fight, at a system that threw me away. That anger kept me alive." She looked at each of them. "But now I don't know who I am without it. I don't know how to be the person you remember." Anthony reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "Then don't be her. Be who you are now. We'll love whoever that is." The words were meant to comfort, but they unleashed something Celeste had kept carefully buried for decades, the fear that love was conditional, that it could be lost as suddenly as freedom had been stolen. "What if you don't?" she whispered. "What if I'm too broken? What if I can't be fixed?" The question hung in the air, raw and honest and terrified. Outside, Denver evenings settled into darkness, wrapping Michael's house in the kind of peace Celeste was still learning to trust. But inside, 3 adults who owed their lives to the woman across from them, prepared to spend however long it took, proving that some bonds are stronger than time, trauma, or fear. 3 days into their stay in Denver, the carefully maintained equilibrium shattered over something as simple as a child's laughter. Celeste was helping Michael prepare lessons in his home office when the sound drifted through the open window, a little girl's giggle from the playground across the street. The pure joy in that sound hit Celeste like a physical blow, and she sank into the nearest chair, her face draining of color. "What is it?" Michael asked, abandoning his stack of worksheets. But Celeste couldn't speak. That laugh had transported her backward through time, to a memory she'd spent 25 years trying to bury so deep it couldn't hurt her anymore. Jessica found them there 10 minutes later. Michael crouched beside Celeste's chair while she stared blankly out the window, tears streaming down her face. "I need to tell you something," Celeste whispered. "Something I should have told you 25 years ago." They gathered in Michael's living room, the afternoon light casting long shadows across the hardwood floors. Celeste sat with her hands folded in her lap, looking smaller than they'd ever seen her. "You weren't the only children I was trying to save," she began, her voice barely audible. "Before I found you 3, there was Keisha." The name fell into the silence like a stone into still water, creating ripples none of them had expected. "My daughter," Celeste continued. "She was 4 when Child Services took her away from me." Anthony's breath caught. In all their research, all their investigation into Celeste's background, they'd never found any record of a child. I was 19, working 3 jobs, living in a studio apartment with no heat half the time. I thought I was doing okay. I thought, her voice broke. I came home from my night shift and found my neighbor watching Keisha through the thin walls, had called CPS because she'd been crying. They said I was neglecting her, that a 4-year-old shouldn't be left alone even for a few hours. Jessica's legal mind was already working. Celeste, single mothers work night shifts all the time. That's not grounds for. It was in 1994. I was a 19-year-old black single mother with no family support and 3 minimum wage jobs. The system wasn't interested in helping me keep my daughter. Celeste's hands trembled as she continued. They placed her in foster care temporarily while I got my life together. But temporary became permanent when they decided I wasn't stable enough. Michael moved closer, his teacher's heart recognizing the deepest kind of loss. She was adopted by a family in California. They changed her name, cut all contact. I hired a lawyer with money I didn't have, fought for 2 years, but Celeste shrugged. The gesture encompassing decades of powerlessness. The court said she was better off with them, more stable, more financially secure. The room was completely silent except for the distant sound of children playing outside. So when I found you 3, Celeste continued, you weren't just children who needed help. You were my chance to be the mother I couldn't be to Keisha. You were my chance to save someone. Anthony felt something click into place. The fierce protectiveness Celeste had shown them, the way she'd fought bureaucracy with the determination of someone who'd lost that battle before. Is that why you never married? Jessica asked gently. Never had other children? Celeste nodded. I couldn't trust myself to keep anyone safe. If I couldn't protect my own daughter, how could I protect anyone else? But you did protect us, Michael said firmly. No. The word came out sharp, bitter. I failed you too. I was supposed to get you into good homes, keep you together if possible, make sure you were safe. Instead, I got arrested and you got scattered into the system, just like Keisha did. She stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. Do you know what the worst part of prison was? Not the violence or the isolation or the terrible food. It was knowing that I'd proven everyone right, that I really was the kind of person who couldn't protect the children she loved. Anthony rose and moved to stand behind her, his reflection joining hers in the window glass. Celeste, what happened to us wasn't your fault. Wasn't it? She turned to face him, and he saw in her eyes the same desolation he'd witnessed in his most critically ill patients. If I'd been more careful, if I'd found you better hiding places, if I'd worked faster with the social workers, if the police had done their jobs properly, you never would have been arrested, Jessica interrupted. If your public defender had actually defended you, you wouldn't have been convicted. If the prosecutor had been interested in justice instead of statistics, they would have investigated Wright's involvement. But Celeste was shaking her head. You don't understand. I wanted you so badly. When I found you 3 in that building, it felt like God was giving me a second chance. Maybe too badly. Maybe I made choices based on what I needed instead of what was best for you. Michael stood up, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd spent years working with children and families. Celeste, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I work with kids every day. I see good parents and bad parents, people who should have children and people who shouldn't. You know what I've never seen? She looked at him, waiting. I've never seen anyone fight as hard as you fought for us. I've never seen anyone put children's needs so completely before their own. You didn't save us because you needed to be needed. You saved us because we needed to be saved. Anthony pulled out his phone, scrolling to a photo he'd carried for years. This is my son Marcus, he said, showing them a picture of a little boy with his father's serious eyes and gentle smile. Celeste stared at the photo, her breath catching. He's 7 now. Same age I was when you found me. And you know what I tell him about his name? Celeste shook her head. I tell him he's named after the strongest, bravest woman I ever knew. That his middle name is Washington because that's the name of the person who taught me what love looks like. Tears were flowing freely down Celeste's face now. Jessica reached into her purse and pulled out a small, wrapped box. We wanted to wait for the right moment to give you this. Inside was a simple silver bracelet engraved with 4 names: Keisha, Anthony, Jessica, Michael. We found records of her adoption, Jessica said softly. Her new name is Keisha Marie Thompson. She lives in San Diego, she's a teacher like Michael, and she has 2 children of her own. Celeste's hands shook as she held the bracelet. We reached out to her, Anthony continued, carefully, respectfully. We told her about you, about what you meant to us. She wants to meet you, Celeste, when you're ready. The bracelet fell from Celeste's fingers as she collapsed into Michael's arms, 29 years of grief finally finding its voice. She sobbed like a child, deep, wrenching cries that seemed to come from the very core of her being. She wants to meet me, she whispered between sobs. She said she's thought about you every day for 29 years, Jessica said, her own voice thick with emotion. She said she never stopped hoping she'd find you again. As evening settled over Denver, Celeste sat surrounded by the children she'd saved, holding a bracelet that connected her to the daughter she'd lost and the grandchildren she'd never met. The weight of 25 years of self-blame was beginning to lift, replaced by something she'd forgotten how to recognize. Hope. Real, tangible, dangerous hope that maybe, just maybe, love really could triumph over loss. The video call was scheduled for 2 p.m. Denver time, 1 p.m. in San Diego. Celeste had changed clothes 3 times, her hands shaking each time she tried to fasten buttons or smooth her hair. What if she's disappointed? She whispered to Jessica, who was adjusting the laptop camera angle for the 4th time. What if I'm not what she expected her mother to be? Michael sat beside her on the couch, his steady presence anchoring her. What if she's just happy to finally see your face? Anthony stood behind them, his hands resting gently on Celeste's shoulders. Remember, you don't have to talk for hours. Even 5 minutes is 29 years longer than you've had. The computer chimed with an incoming call. Celeste's breath caught as Jessica clicked accept, and suddenly the screen filled with a woman's face, older than the 4-year-old Celeste remembered, but unmistakably her daughter. The same warm brown eyes, the same stubborn chin, the same gentle smile that had once lit up their tiny apartment. "Mama?" Keisha's voice was soft, tentative, breaking on the single word. Celeste couldn't speak. She could only stare at the grown woman who'd once been her baby girl, memorizing every line of her face, every gray thread in her hair, every detail she'd missed over 29 years. "It's really you," Keisha whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I used to dream about what you looked like now. I was so afraid I wouldn't recognize you." "Baby," Celeste finally managed, her voice cracking. "My baby girl. You're so beautiful." They cried together across 2 time zones, mother and daughter reunited through pixels and Wi-Fi, but connected by bonds that had survived decades of separation. "I have so many questions," Keisha said, wiping her eyes. "But first I need you to know, I never stopped loving you, even when I was angry, even when I didn't understand why you'd let them take me. I never stopped loving you." Celeste's heart broke and healed simultaneously. "I never stopped fighting to find you. Even in prison, I kept trying. I hired lawyers, filed appeals, sent letters to agencies, but they said you were better off without me." "Prison?" Keisha leaned closer to the camera, confused. Anthony gently squeezed Celeste's shoulder. "Would you like us to explain?" For the next hour they told Keisha everything, how Celeste had found them, how she'd saved them, how she'd been wrongfully convicted and had only been freed 3 days ago. Keisha listened in stunned silence, her expression cycling through shock, grief, and a growing fury at the injustice her mother had endured. 25 years, she said finally. You spent 25 years in prison for something you didn't do. But look what grew from it, Celeste said, gesturing to Anthony, Jessica, and Michael. These 3 became everything I dreamed for them. They became doctors and lawyers and teachers. They saved lives and changed the world in ways I never could have. Mama, Keisha's voice was firm. You did save lives. You saved theirs. And in a way, you saved mine too. Celeste frowned, not understanding. I became a teacher because I remembered you reading to me every night, even when you were exhausted from work. I chose to adopt children from foster care because I remembered what it felt like to be taken from someone who loved me. Keisha paused, then smiled through her tears. I have 2 kids, Mama, your grandchildren, and they know all about their brave grandmother who never gave up fighting for the people she loved. The camera shifted as Keisha called someone off-screen. 2 children appeared, a boy about 8 and a girl around 6, both looking curiously at the computer. This is your Grandma Celeste, Keisha told them. The one I've told you stories about. The little girl, bold in the way only 6-year-olds can be, waved at the camera. Hi, Grandma. Mama says you're a superhero. Celeste laughed through her tears. A sound she hadn't made in 25 years, pure, unguarded joy. After the call ended, the 4 of them sat in Michael's living room, emotionally drained but somehow lighter than they'd been since childhood. She's coming next week, Celeste said, holding the bracelet Jessica had given her. With the children, she wants them to meet their grandmother in person. How do you feel about that? Anthony asked. Celeste was quiet for a long moment, terrified, happy, grateful, like maybe I'm dreaming and I'll wake up back in my cell. Michael reached over and took her hand. Want to know a secret? When I got my first teaching job, I called the school every morning for a month to make sure they hadn't changed their minds about hiring me. Good things can feel too good to be true when you've been without them for too long. The difference is, Jessica added, you deserved your teaching job. Celeste deserves this reunion. She deserves to know her grandchildren and to have her daughter back in her life. That evening, they cooked dinner together. A simple meal of spaghetti and salad, but it felt like a celebration. Celeste found herself laughing at Anthony's terrible jokes, arguing with Jessica about whether pineapple belonged on pizza, and listening to Michael's stories about his students with the fascination of someone discovering a new world. You know what I missed most? She said, as they cleaned up the dishes. Not the big things, not birthdays or graduations or weddings. I missed this. Ordinary evenings. Deciding what to watch on TV, arguing over whose turn it is to take out the trash. Well, it's definitely Anthony's turn, Jessica said, tossing a dish towel at him. Hey, I did it yesterday, he protested. But he was laughing. You took out your hotel room trash, Michael pointed out. That's not the same thing. Watching them bicker like siblings, Celeste felt something she'd thought was lost forever, the simple pleasure of belonging to a family. Not the family she'd been born into, not the family she'd tried to create with Keisha, but this strange, beautiful family, forged in an abandoned building and strengthened by 25 years of separation. Later, as they settled in to watch a movie, Celeste's first movie in a quarter-century, she found herself studying their faces in the blue glow of the television screen. Anthony, now a surgeon who saved children's lives every day. Jessica, a lawyer who fought for justice. Michael, a teacher who shaped young minds with the same gentleness she'd tried to show them. I did one thing right, she said suddenly, causing all 3 to look at her. Just one thing? Jessica asked with a smile. I loved you. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of everything she'd been trying to forgive herself for. I loved you the best way I knew how, and that love grew into this. She gestured around the room, at the life Michael had built, at the success each of them had achieved. Love multiplies, Anthony said softly. You taught us that. Every patient I save, every family I help heal, that's your love multiplying. Every case I take pro bono, every wrongfully accused person I defend, that's your love too, Jessica added. Every kid who walks into my classroom scared and walks out confident, that's because you showed me what it looks like when someone believes in you, Michael finished. As the credits rolled on the movie none of them had really watched, Celeste felt something she hadn't experienced in 25 years, peace. Not the forced quiet of imprisonment, but the deep, restful peace that comes from knowing you are exactly where you belong. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There would be legal proceedings, media attention, the complex process of rebuilding a life from nothing. There would be therapy to help her process trauma, practical matters like finding housing and employment, and the delicate work of rebuilding relationships with people who'd grown and changed in her absence. But tonight, surrounded by the children she'd saved, who had grown up to save her in return, Celeste Washington finally allowed herself to believe that some stories do have happy endings, even hers. The call came at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, jerking them all from the first peaceful sleep Celeste had managed in weeks. Michael answered his phone with the groggy confusion of someone pulled from deep dreams. Mr. Torres. This is Agent Patricia Hayes with the FBI. We need to speak with Celeste Washington immediately regarding new developments in her case. The words cut through the morning quiet like a blade. Within minutes, they were all gathered around Michael's kitchen table, the FBI agent's voice crackling through the speaphone, with news that made Celeste's blood run cold. Mrs. Washington, we've been investigating irregularities in cases from the late 1990s in Detroit, prompted by your exoneration. We've discovered evidence that suggests your case may be connected to a larger pattern of corruption. Jessica leaned forward, her legal instincts sharp despite the early hour. Detective Raymond Kowalski, the lead investigator on Mrs. Washington's case, has been arrested on charges including evidence tampering, witness intimidation, and accepting bribes from drug dealers in exchange for targeting innocent parties as scapegoats. The silence that followed was deafening. Are you saying? Celeste's voice was barely a whisper. Are you saying I was deliberately framed? We're saying that Detective Kowalski received $5,000 from drug dealers operating in your neighborhood to ensure that the Lou convenience store robbery was pinned on someone other than their associate, Damon Wright. Your name came up because you'd been asking social services questions about the children in that area, questions that were making certain people nervous about their illegal operations. Anthony grabbed the edge of the table, his knuckles white. She was targeted because she was trying to help us? It appears so. Mrs. Washington, we need you to come in for questioning. There may be additional charges we can file, and your testimony could be crucial in prosecuting others involved in this conspiracy. After Agent Hayes hung up, the kitchen fell into a silence so complete that the hum of the refrigerator sounded like thunder. Celeste sat staring at her hands, processing the magnitude of what they'd just learned. 25 years, she said finally. 25 years, because I asked too many questions about 3 homeless children. Celeste, Michael began. No. Her voice was sharp, cutting. Don't try to make this better or find the silver lining or tell me it all worked out in the end. She stood abruptly, pacing to the window. I lost everything. My daughter, my freedom, my entire adult life. And for what? Because some drug dealers were afraid a woman caring about children might interfere with their business? Jessica reached for her, but Celeste pulled away. And you 3, she continued, her voice rising. You spent your childhoods in foster homes and group facilities because I cared too much, because I couldn't mind my own business. That's not Anthony started, isn't it? Celeste whirled to face them, 25 years of suppressed rage finally erupting. If I hadn't found you, you would have been discovered by proper authorities eventually. You would have been placed in the system through normal channels. You wouldn't have been traumatized by watching the one person who cared about you get dragged away in handcuffs. If you hadn't found us, we would have died, Michael said quietly. Would that have been worse? The words came out broken, desperate. Would that have been worse than growing up knowing that love is something that gets ripped away without warning? That caring about people makes you a target? The room fell silent. Outside, Denver was waking up, cars starting, dogs barking, children walking to school, normal life continuing while their world imploded again. I need to be alone, Celeste said, her voice hollow. Celeste, please, Jessica began. I said I need to be alone. The shout echoed off the walls, and in the silence that followed, Celeste looked at the three faces staring at her with hurt and confusion, and felt something inside her break completely. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm sorry I found you. I'm sorry I loved you. I'm sorry I ruined your lives by caring. She walked out of the kitchen, leaving them sitting in the wreckage of everything they'd thought they understood about their story. Over the next 3 days, Celeste retreated into a silence so complete it was like she'd disappeared while still being physically present. She ate when food was placed in front of her, showered when reminded, and spoke only when directly asked questions that required yes or no answers. Anthony tried reaching her through medical logic, explaining trauma responses and the importance of processing grief. Jessica approached it legally, discussing the justice they could now pursue, the vindication this new evidence provided. Michael used the gentle persistence of a teacher working with a shut-down student. Nothing worked. On Thursday evening, Jessica's phone rang. It was Keisha, calling about her planned visit. I have the tickets booked for Saturday, Keisha said, her voice bright with excitement. The kids are so excited to meet their grandmother. Marcus made her a drawing and Amy learned a song she wants to sing for her. Jessica looked across the room at Celeste, who was sitting by the window staring at nothing, and felt her heart break. Keisha, I need to tell you something. She explained about the FBI investigation, about the corruption that had been uncovered, about Celeste's reaction to learning she'd been deliberately targeted. She thinks she's poison, Jessica finished. She thinks everyone she loves gets hurt. No, Keisha's voice was fierce. No, I'm not losing her again. Not after 29 years. Not when we just found each other. Maybe you should wait. Maybe I should come early. Tomorrow instead of Saturday. That night, Anthony found Celeste sitting on Michael's back porch at 2 a.m., wrapped in a blanket and staring at the stars. Can't sleep? He asked, settling into the chair beside her. She didn't answer. You know what I was thinking about today? He continued conversationally. That fever. The one that almost killed me when I was 7. Still silence. The doctors at the hospital told me later that I came within hours of dying. My brain temperature was so high it could have caused permanent damage. He paused. But you wouldn't let me give up, would you? You sat with me for 3 days straight, putting cold compresses on my forehead, making me drink water when all I wanted to do was sleep. Celeste's hands tightened on the blanket. The thing is, I remember what you whispered to me when you thought I was unconscious. You said, "Don't you leave me, baby boy. Don't you dare leave me. This world needs you in it, and I need you in it." He turned in his chair to face her profile. Well, I didn't leave. None of us did. And now it's my turn to say it. His voice was gentle but absolutely firm. Don't you leave us, Celeste. Don't you dare leave us. This world needs you in it. We need you in it. And tomorrow your daughter and grandchildren need you in it too." For the first time in 3 days, Celeste turned to look at him. Her eyes were red-rimmed and hollow, but they were looking at him. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know. I'm so angry I can't see straight." "I know that too. I don't know how to be happy when everything is so broken." Anthony reached over and took her hand. "Then don't be happy yet. Be here. Be present. Be willing to let people love you even when loving feels dangerous." She squeezed his hand, and for the first time since the FBI had called, she didn't let go when someone tried to comfort her. It was a beginning. Friday morning arrived, gray and drizzling, Denver weather that matched the heaviness hanging over Michael's house. Celeste had slept fitfully after her conversation with Anthony, waking every few hours from dreams where she was running through endless corridors, searching for children who kept disappearing around corners. She found Jessica in the kitchen at dawn, sitting at the table with her laptop open and legal documents spread everywhere. "What's all this?" Celeste asked, her voice hoarse from disuse. Jessica looked up, surprised to hear her speak voluntarily for the first time in days. "Civil suits. Against the city, the police department, Detective Kowalski, personally. You could be entitled to millions. Celeste. Enough to never worry about money again. Enough to help other wrongfully convicted people. Enough to—" "I don't want money." Celeste poured herself coffee with shaking hands. "Money won't give me back 25 years. No, but it could ensure you never have to depend on anyone again." The words hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning. Celeste set down her coffee cup carefully. "Is that what you think this is about? Dependence?" Jessica's fingers stilled on her keyboard. "I think you're terrified of needing people. I think you're terrified of letting us help you, because everyone who's ever tried to help you has either failed or been hurt in the process." "Aren't you terrified?" Celeste asked quietly. "Don't you realize that being connected to me puts you at risk? Your law firm, your reputation, your family—" "My family?" Jessica's voice rose. "Celeste, you are my family. You're the first person who ever made me feel like I was worth saving. But look what it cost." "It cost me nothing." Jessica slammed her laptop shut. "It cost me nothing to love you. Yes, I went through hell in foster care after you were arrested. Yes, I had to fight harder than any kid should have to fight. But I won, Celeste. I became a lawyer because of what happened to you. I fight for people who have no one else, because I know what it feels like to watch someone innocent get destroyed by the system." She stood up, pacing to the window. "You want to know what would cost me something? Watching you disappear again. Watching you choose fear over love because you think loving you is dangerous." Celeste sat in silence, absorbing Jessica's words. Outside, the rain was picking up, drumming against the windows with increasing intensity. "Keisha called last night," Jessica continued without turning around. "She's driving up from Colorado Springs with the kids. They'll be here in a few hours." Celeste's breath caught. "I thought she was flying in Saturday. She moved up her trip when I told her what was happening. She said she wasn't going to let fear steal any more time from your relationship." Jessica finally turned to face her. She said she'd spent 29 years wondering if her mother was alive, and now that she knows you are, she's not wasting another day. Michael appeared in the doorway, still in his pajamas, hair sticking up at odd angles. "Did I hear someone say Keisha's coming today?" "In about 3 hours," Jessica confirmed. Michael looked at Celeste, who was gripping her coffee mug like it was an anchor. "How are you feeling about that?" "Terrified," Celeste said, honestly. "What if I'm not ready? What if I say the wrong thing? What if the kids see me and realize their grandmother is just a broken old woman who doesn't know how to be happy?" Anthony appeared behind Michael, fully dressed despite the early hour. What if they see you and realize their grandmother is a woman who survived 25 years of hell and came out the other side still capable of love? That's not what they'll see. That's exactly what they'll see, Michael interrupted. Because that's exactly what you are. Celeste looked around at the three faces watching her with such fierce protectiveness and felt the walls she'd built over the past few days begin to crack. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. "All these years in prison, I used to have this recurring dream. I'd dream that I was in a courtroom, and the judge would say I was free to go, and I'd walk outside and you three would be there waiting for me. Grown up, successful, but still my babies." She took a shaky breath. "I had that dream so many times I started to be afraid of it, because every time I woke up, reality hurt more." "But this isn't a dream," Anthony said gently. "I know, that's what scares me." She looked at each of them. "What if I mess this up? What if I'm not who you needed me to be all these years? What if I'm not who Keisha needs me to be now?" Michael sat down across from her, his teacher voice calm and steady. "Celeste, do you remember the first night you found us? When I told you I was scared of everything?" She nodded. "You told me that being scared didn't mean I was weak. You said it meant I was smart enough to know that some things were worth protecting." He reached across the table and covered her hand with his. "Your fear right now, it's because you love us. It's because this matters to you. That's not weakness. That's the strongest thing in the world." The front door bell rang, echoing through the house like a gunshot. They all froze. "That's not Keisha," Jessica said, checking her watch. "She won't be here for another 2 hours." Anthony went to answer it, returning moments later with a package. "It's for you, Celeste, from San Diego." With trembling hands, Celeste opened the overnight envelope. Inside was a child's drawing, stick figures holding hands under a rainbow, with "I love you Grandma Celeste" written in careful purple crayon letters. There was also a note in adult handwriting. "Mama, Marcus drew this for you yesterday. He said he wanted to make sure you knew we love you before we even meet you in person. I told him and Amy all about how brave you are, how you saved other children even when it was dangerous. They think you're a superhero. So do I. We'll be there soon. Your daughter, Keisha." Celeste pressed the drawing to her chest, tears streaming down her face. "She still calls me Mama," she whispered. "Of course she does," Jessica said softly. "That's who you are." For the first time in days, Celeste felt something other than fear and rage. She felt something that might, maybe be hope. "I need to shower," she said suddenly, standing up, "and find something nice to wear. My grandchildren are coming to meet me." As she headed toward the stairs, she paused and looked back at the three adults who'd become her anchor in a world that had tried to destroy her. "Thank you," she said simply, "for not giving up on me, for not letting me give up on myself." "Never," Anthony said firmly. "We're family," Jessica added. "Families don't give up on each other," Michael finished. 2 hours later, Celeste stood at Michael's front window, wearing the nicest clothes they could find, her hair carefully styled, clutching Marcus's drawing. Her heart hammered against her ribs as a blue sedan pulled into the driveway. The car doors opened, and Keisha stepped out, followed by 2 children who looked around with the wide-eyed curiosity of kids in a new place. "They're here," Celeste whispered. And for the first time in 25 years, she chose to walk toward love instead of away from it. Celeste's hand trembled on the doorknob. Through the glass, she could see Keisha helping the children out of the car, their small faces bright with excitement and curiosity. 29 years of separation stood between her and the threshold, 29 years of wondering and hoping and grieving. "You've got this," Anthony said softly behind her. She opened the door. Keisha looked up from the driveway, and their eyes met across the distance. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then Keisha was running, her children forgotten, as she launched herself into her mother's arms with the abandon of the 4-year-old she'd once been. "Mama?" she sobbed into Celeste's shoulder. "My mama." They held each other on Michael's front porch, crying and laughing and trying to memorize the feeling of being together again. Behind Keisha, 2 small faces watched with the solemn intensity of children witnessing something important they don't quite understand. "Are you our grandma?" the little boy asked finally, his voice carrying that perfect clarity children possess. Celeste pulled back from Keisha, wiping her eyes as she looked down at her grandchildren for the first time. Marcus, 8 years old with his mother's gentle eyes and an artist's careful way of seeing the world. Amy, 6, with pigtails and a gap-toothed grin that could light up a room. "I am," Celeste said, kneeling to their level. "If you want me to be." Amy stepped forward with the fearless confidence of a child who'd been loved unconditionally since birth. "Mama says you're brave like Wonder Woman, but you don't have a cape." "Well," Celeste said seriously, "the best superheroes are the ones who don't need capes." Marcus approached more carefully, studying her face with an intensity that reminded her achingly of Anthony at that age. "I drew you a picture." "I know," Celeste said, pulling the drawing from her pocket where she'd kept it all morning. "It's the most beautiful thing anyone's ever given me." His face lit up with pride. "Really? Really? Would you like to see where I put it?" She led them inside, where she'd taped the drawing to the refrigerator at child height, right next to Michael's collection of student artwork. "It looks perfect there," Michael said, appearing in the kitchen doorway. "Marcus, Amy, I'm Mr. Torres. Your grandma saved my life when I was about your age." "How?" Amy demanded with 6-year-old directness. As Michael began telling the story, Celeste found herself watching the scene unfold with wonder. Her daughter was here, real and solid and grown. Her grandchildren were here, filling Michael's house with the kind of chaos and joy that only children can bring. And her 3 saved children, now successful adults, were seamlessly incorporating this new branch of their chosen family tree. "Mama," Keisha said quietly, moving to stand beside her. Celeste tensed, old fears rising. "I'm not angry," Keisha continued, "about any of it. The adoption, the years apart, even the fact that you were in prison. I'm not angry because I understand now what you sacrificed. You gave up everything, including your freedom, to save children who needed you." "But you needed me too," Celeste whispered. "And you gave me the most important thing a mother can give her daughter," Keisha smiled. "You gave me the knowledge that I was loved completely and unconditionally, even if we had to be apart. That love carried me through everything." Later that afternoon, they sat around Michael's dining room table sharing pizza and stories. Marcus had appointed himself the family artist, drawing portraits of everyone present. Amy had claimed Anthony as her personal jungle gym, despite his protests that she was going to wrinkle his shirt. "So what happens now?" Keisha asked, watching her daughter try to braid Anthony's hair. "Now we figure it out as we go," Celeste said. "I have some legal things to resolve, some decisions to make about where I want to live and what I want to do next. The FBI thinks the corruption case could take months to fully prosecute," Jessica added. "You'll probably need to testify multiple times." "Will you stay in Denver?" Keisha asked hopefully. Celeste looked around the table at the faces that had become her world. "I don't know yet, but I know that wherever I go, I want to be close to all of you. Close enough that we don't lose any more time." Anthony's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it and smiled. "That was my wife. She wants to know when she gets to meet the woman who saved her husband's life." "You're married?" Celeste asked, delighted. 5 years next month. Sarah's a pediatric nurse. We met in the EU. His expression grew soft. "We've been trying to have kids for 3 years. She says she can't wait to learn parenting tips from someone who raised 3 successful adults while homeless and a teenager. I want to meet her, Celeste said firmly. She's flying in tomorrow, he grinned. I may have already invited her. Jessica checked her own phone. And my daughter Nina wants to know when she can meet her honorary grandmother. She's been asking about you since I told her your story. Bring her, Celeste said without hesitation. Bring all of them. I've missed 29 years with Keisha, and 8 years with Marcus, and 6 years with Amy. I don't want to miss another day with any of the people I love. As evening settled over Denver, they found themselves in Michael's backyard, the adults sitting on the porch while the children played in the small garden. Keisha was showing Marcus and Amy how to catch fireflies, their laughter floating through the warm air. Do you remember, Celeste said quietly, that last night before everything fell apart? You were all so excited because I'd told you about the families who wanted to meet you. I remember, Michael said. I was scared but hopeful. I was angry, Anthony admitted. I didn't want to leave you. I was trying to figure out how to take you with us, Jessica added. Celeste smiled. You did take me with you. In every choice you made, every person you helped, every life you saved, you took me with you. And now we have you back, Keisha said, settling onto the porch steps. For real this time. A comfortable silence fell over them, broken only by the children's delighted shrieks as they chased fireflies through the gathering dusk. There's something I need to tell you all, Celeste said eventually. Something I realized today. They waited, attentive. For 25 years, I thought my life was a failure. I thought I'd been put on this earth to love and protect children, and I'd failed at the most basic level. She paused, watching Amy carefully cup a firefly in her small hands. But today I realized that's not the whole story. She looked at each of them in turn. Anthony, you save children's lives every day. Jessica, you fight for justice, for people who have no one else. Michael, you teach and nurture and help kids believe in themselves. Keisha, you adopted children from foster care and gave them the love you remembered receiving. Her voice grew stronger. The love I planted in an abandoned building 25 years ago didn't die when I was taken away. It grew. It multiplied. It spread to hundreds of people I'll never meet, but whose lives are better because I loved you first. Amy came running up to the porch, her hands cupped carefully around a firefly. Look, Grandma. I caught one. It's beautiful, baby, Celeste said, her heart full to overflowing. We let it go so it can light up the whole world, Amy said seriously, opening her hands and watching the firefly spiral up into the darkening sky. As they watched it disappear among the stars, Celeste felt a peace settle over her that she'd never experienced before. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of something greater, the knowledge that love once given freely creates ripples that extend far beyond what the giver can ever imagine. Sometimes our greatest impact comes from the love we plant in others that grows long after we're gone. What act of kindness has rippled through your life in unexpected ways? Share your story in the comments. You never know who might need to hear it. 3 months later, Celeste Washington stood in the Denver courthouse, not as a defendant, but as a witness in the prosecution of Detective Raymond Kowalski and 3 other corrupt officials. She wore a blue dress Keisha had helped her pick out, and in the gallery behind her sat 7 people who had rearranged their lives to be there. Anthony and his wife Sarah, Jessica and her daughter Nina, Michael, Keisha, and Keisha's children. Her testimony was clear, dignified, and devastating. When she finished, she walked out of that courthouse and into a life that was finally truly her own. 6 months later, the Celeste Washington Foundation for Wrongfully Convicted Persons opened its doors in Detroit, funded by her settlement with the city and staffed by a lawyer named Jessica Chen, who'd taken a leave of absence from her Seattle firm to fight for justice full-time. 1 year later, Dr. Anthony Rivers and his wife Sarah welcomed their first child, a daughter they named Celeste Hope Rivers. 2 years later, Michael Torres published a book called The Woman Who Saved Us, a true story of love, loss, and the children who never forgot. All proceeds went to programs supporting children aging out of foster care. And 25 years after 3 children in an abandoned building reached for a stranger's outstretched hand, Celeste Washington sat in her small apartment in Denver, surrounded by photos of graduations and weddings and grandchildren's birthday parties, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. She was 75 years old. She was free. She was loved. And she was exactly where she belonged. The fireflies came out as darkness fell, tiny lights dancing through her garden, carrying her love into the world one spark at a time.
If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one. Thank you for watching this story to the end.